Okay, so this is our second video. We're going to go back to aceitlab.com and we're going to log into our account. And you'll notice now in the upper left that where it says select lab, that box has gotten a lot larger. We have a lab that we can select. I've already clicked copy to my labs. You're going to do that. At that point, you're going to see my labs. I'm going to click on 70-741 and I'm going to click activate. Now I should be able to select. Damn it. Okay, just had to wait a little while for that activate to take place. So now you'll notice that the background changed, a little bit different color. The important part is down here at the bottom of your screen. We're going to be working with our LUN DC, so I'm going to go ahead and click on. That's going to tell it to turn on. You can see now the green bar, or the gray bar, has now changed to green, showing that it's been turned on, powered on. That's the only virtual machine that we're going to be working with at this time, so that's the only one we need to turn on. The next thing you're going to need to do is you're going to click console. As soon as you click console, you can see that our virtual machine is now setting itself up. It's going to go through the setup process just like as if we had put the ISO in and had answered all those questions, except we don't have to answer any of those questions. It's simply going to go through, it's going to get the devices ready, and once it gets all the devices ready, we're going to simply be presented with a logon screen. Okay, so that took about 2 minutes, and I'm on my logon screen. So I'm going to go up to the top of the screen, and I'm going to press the Control-Alt-Delete button. I'm now presented with my administrator logon. We're going to use the same capital PA11WORD. You notice we're using an O, not a 0. We're using 1s, not 5s. This is the way that all of the servers will be set up to log into. Capital PA11WORD. I press enter. We're waiting for the user profile service. And this will take just a moment, and it's going to go through the same setup routine as our virtualized Hyper-V infrastructure. Okay, so my server manager has come up, and you'll notice that obviously I paused the video while the server manager was loading. No need for you to sit in silence listening to and watching a video that's not doing anything. Server manager is up. What's the next thing we do? We go to local server. Local server, we're going to select, first off, we're going to set our IP address. And you'll remember that we're going to go to, right click, go to properties, and we use 172.16.0.10. And our subnet mask, we were using a Class C subnet, so I need to change the third octet to 255. I'm going to set my default gateway to 172.16.0.1. And we're going to be using our self for the DNS, so I'm going to set it to 172.16.0.10. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click OK and OK, and go ahead and close this. I'll refresh my server manager and I should see that IP address assigned. I do. So next thing we're ready to do is rename our computer. LUN-DC1. We click OK. We have to restart the computer. I'm going to click close. I get re-prompted again. And restart now. And just like that, through the magic of video, we're ready to log back in. capital PA11WORD. Have you heard me say that enough times already? We're waiting for our server manager to come up, and you'll notice just like before we get the little yellow triangle. We're going to wait for server manager to finish loading. Should only take a moment. And we're going to go to manage, add roles and features. We click next, next, next. Active Directory Domain Services. Under roles, you're going to select Active Directory Domain Services. You're going to select add features. You're going to add DNS server and add features. You're going to select DHCP server and add features. We click next. We click next. We are not going to install any features at this time. We click next. We click next. We click next under DHCP server. We click install. As you can see, we're going to install the DHCP server. That will be the last thing we configure. Once we're done with the install, we'll promote this to be a domain controller for our network. Once the new domain controller restarts, we'll fully configure our DNS. Once our DNS is configured, then and only then can we configure our DHCP. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video again while the installation takes place. Okay, so some things take just as long on our new online virtual access as it did on our desktops. If we were running just that single virtual machine, we could have done this in just about the same amount of time. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to click close. At that point, you'll notice there's a lot more boxes up here. We're going to come up to the top. We're going to click on notifications, and we're going to click on that first one that says promote this server to a domain controller. Who knows what we're going to do now? Since this is our first domain controller, it's also a new forest. There's no domain controller that we can add to an existing domain. There's no other domains. There's no forest that's already been built, so we can't add a new domain to an existing forest. The only option we have is to add a new forest. We're going to use our datum.com domain name. Click next. It's going to check and make sure that root domain name doesn't exist anywhere else yet. Okay, so once it verified that that root domain name hasn't been used, we can see that we can use a functional level of server 2016. That's our only server, so that's what version we're running. That's what functional levels we can run at. It's going to have the domain name server role installed. It's also going to be a global catalog. You have to have at least one global catalog in every site. We're going to set the password that we've been using all along, because that's going to follow our labs. Let's think about that for a second. You know what? The more I think about it, we're going to keep the same password for logging in to the servers as we're going to use here. We're going to put in capital PA11WORD. Let's try that again. Capital PA11ORD. I'm going to confirm it. Capital PA11WORD. We're going to keep uniform passwords. So if we get to the point where we can get back into the classroom and use our Hyper-V, then we'll revert back to what's in our workbooks. But for now, we're simply going to be following along with these lessons, and we're going to use the same password that we use to log into these virtual machines. We're going to use that uniformly. So we're going to click next. It's going to tell us, hey, delegation can't, well, there is no authoritative parent zone because it hasn't been created yet. We're going to click next. It's going to verify that the datum netbios name can be assigned to the domain. We click next. And if you remember our discussions before, if this was a true production server, we'd probably want to put the database folder, log files, and sysfile folder on a different drive. Take all that activity off of the drive where the operating system is at. Let the operating system be the operating system. Let all these writes, because this is a database, these are logs, let all that activity take place on a different drive, giving the C drive priority for doing the operating system and only the operating system. This is our virtual environment. We're not going to do that. We have a single drive. We click Next. Verifies that all our settings are exactly what we want them to be. We click Next. It's going to verify our prerequisites, making sure that everything's there, that there's no errors. We should get a couple warnings, some informational things, and we should get a couple green check marks saying that we're ready to promote. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video again while it's doing those prerequisite checks. Okay, so as you can see for the green check box up here, all prerequisite checks passed successfully. We do have a couple warnings that talk about the default security setting that's backwards compatible with Windows NT 4. Delegation, well, there is no other authoritative parent zone. That's why we got that warning. We're good to go. We click Install. Now at this point it's going to start building out the structure of our Active Directory. So while that happens, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit pause one more time. Okay, installation was successful. I'm about to be signed out because this has to restart, and at that point we're going to be logging in as our domain administrator, and there it is restarting. We're shutting down our services. Coming back up, should only take a few moments for it to restart. Like I said, we're very thankful for Broward College providing this access. They put a lot of money into building this. Okay, so once this comes back up, we're going to be logging in as domain administrator. And since this is the first domain controller in our new forest, in our new domain, which is also the first domain, so it's the first domain in our forest, we will also be the enterprise administrator. If this was a child domain or a secondary domain in our forest, we may not be an enterprise administrator, we might just be domain administrator. Additionally, once it comes up, we'll be setting up our DNS. We'll be creating our reverse lookup. Once we've got our DNS fully configured, then we're going to go and we'll move into authorizing the DHCP server. And then once we've authorized the DHCP server, we'll be able to set up our first scope for DHCP assignment. So while this finishes its setup, I'm going to go ahead and hit pause one more time. Okay, well that took a good 5 or more minutes, it felt like forever, for it to configure the settings. And I'm finally back to a logon prompt. So I'm going to go back up to the top, press Ctrl-Alt-Delete button. And now, as you can see, our domain name is shown. I'm going to put in that same password. And now we're logged into our domain. Now you'll see the event shutdown warning. The AI got impatient and I powered my machine off and turned it back on because I was getting impatient. I thought maybe something was corrupted and it wasn't going to reboot or wasn't going to come back up into the domain, but it did. Yeah, I get impatient just like everybody else. I'm going to take a moment. Okay, our domain is up. So let's go. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on Tools. In Tools, we're going to go down to DNS. We're going to left click one time to select our domain controller, we're going to expand the little caret to the left. We're going to select reverse lookup zones. We're going to right click on reverse lookup zone and say new zone. We're going to click next, 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 next. For your network ID, remember this is the conversation we had in the classroom. What is the network ID for our IP config? We're using 172.16.0.10 as the address for the domain controller using a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. Now that is a class full addressing of a class C address, but we're using a class B space. So our network ID is that portion of the address that is made up of the subnet mask. So for the network ID, I'm going to type in 172.16.0. I'm going to press enter. I'm going to press enter. This is only allow secure dynamic updates. In other words, this way it can only be updated if it's another system that is registered in Active Directory. And we click finish. We now have the ability to reverse look up IP addresses and names. So if I go to mydatum.com, if I double click on my LUNDC A record, if you remember, an A record's for an IPv4, a quad A record, in other words an AAAA, would be an IPv6 record. I'm going to select update associated pointer record. I'm going to click OK. And now when I come back over here, there's the pointer for my LUNDC. If I run a command prompt, and I ping 172.16.0.10, I get a response. If I ping lun-dc1, now I get back an IPv6 response, but you can see it's responding back with the fully qualified domain name. Your FQDM, fully qualified domain name. If I ping my IP address with a -A, you can see that it responds to the IPv4 address and does show the fully qualified domain name. We know that our DNS is working properly. I can type exit, get out of the command prompt. We're going to go ahead and close our DNS manager. Up on our notifications on our yellow triangle, I'm going to click complete DHCP configuration. This is going to authorize the DHCP. And you can see we're going to click next, and it says who is going to be able to authorize it, who's going to be able to configure it. We're going to use our administrator credentials, and we're going to commit that. And then click close. At that point, we have a fully operational domain and DNS. Let's finish this session out by configuring our DHCP scope. We go to Tools, we select DHCP. I'm going to make my window a little bit bigger so it's easier to work with. I'm going to move this vertical bar to the right somewhat. I'm going to select my server. I'm going to select IPv4. I'm going to right click on IPv4 and say New Scope. I'm simply going to click Next, and I'm going to type in a datum as the name of my scope. I'm going to click Next. My starting IP address, let's go 172.16.0. Let's start off handing IP addresses out at 120. And I'm going to finish my range at 172.16.0.139. Is that all we need to do? No. Look at the subnet. Do we want to hand out addresses in a Class B space when our domain controller is on a Class C? We need to change the length to 24. You can see it automatically changes it here. If I leave it at 16 here, and I come down here and type in 255, and click back on the length, you can see it'll automatically change it. If I click down one time, you can see it's going to automatically modify it. I can use my arrow keys also. So I'm going to bring that back up to 24. My subnet mask is good. My IP range is good. I click next. I don't need any exclusions or delay. We can say next. We're going to leave the lease duration the way it is, set for 8 days. We're going to configure some DHCP options, so we will leave yes selected and click next. What's our gateway? Well, that's our router, 172.16.0.1. We click add. Click next. Our domain name is already in there with the IP address for our domain controller. We click next. We're not using Win servers. Maybe if we had some old printers that needed it, we might. We're not going to worry about that. We click next. We do want to activate the scope now, so we checked yes and click next and click finish. We now have an active scope that we can hand out DHCP addresses. In this video, we created our domain, we configured Active Directory, we installed DHCP, we installed DNS, we fully configured our DNS with a reverse lookup, and then created a scope for DHCP. This is the end of video number 2.